Stanley Goble throughout his life preferred to be called Jim or Jimmy. The son of a station master, he followed his father into the railways at age 14, straight from primary school, but by 21 he is the youngest station master in Victoria. He enjoyed learning Morse code and practicing conjuring, among many other things. When the war came, he tried to enlist, as everybody did, but he was knocked back for minor medical reasons, so he made his own way to England and joined the Royal Naval Air Service. It was formed in 1912. At the outbreak of war, it was about 2/3 of the size of the RFC. Even in 1915, their main trainer was the Bristol Boxkite, which was a very primitive Wright-based aircraft. But also by that time, the Royal Naval Air Service had squadrons in the field, quite well organised, as you can see here. The markings are interesting. After training, which is very scathing about, Goble was appointed to the Dover Patrol, the air component of the Dover Patrol, which effectively blocked the channel to the German invasion, to German passage. And it was a good place to begin with. One thing that I found out in this research for this paper is that the front line in Belgium was only about 100 kilometres from Dover. It's like having the enemy at Lithgow while we're in Sydney. He was appointed after the Dover Patrol to St Pol near Amiens, where he flew a variety of aircraft, including this twin-engine Caudron. Again, he was not happy that he was just given the aeroplane and told to fly it virtually with virtually no training. He had his first air combat in January 1916, but the main work was night bombing raids on Ostend, and he's the sort of person who took a lot of time to learn administration, really by taking part in it. And he also got involved in training for Morse code, which he'd learnt great proficiency in the railways. Second victory, July 16, another on 14th to 15th of August. The amazing thing about this time is the height that they flew these open cockpit aircraft without oxygen, up to 19,000 feet. He's awarded a DSC and a Croix de Guerre about this time for various deeds of daring voodoo. He's entrusted with the first Sopwith pup to go on operations and scored the first combat victory with the Sopwith pup. In October, he joined 8th Squadron for service on the Somme. He is the commander of B Flight, offensive patrols flying Sopwith pups. The whole squadron had pups by the end of the year. Interestingly, Robert Little, the most successful Australian airman of World War I, was in Goble's flight. In December 1916, he is awarded a Distinguished Service Order, just one step down from a Victoria Cross, for spectacular bravery on many occasions, particularly when escorting bomber aircraft. He was always well regarded by his superiors. Then to near Dunkirk again, flying Sopwith triplanes. The Navy and the Army had different procurement policies, so the Navy purchased the Sopwith triplane, which was very good in a dogfight, very manoeuvrable. And after that, he came back to Dover, and this was the time of the bomber scourge. The German large heavy bombers, the Gothas, were bombing with impunity. They didn't have the British didn't have a lot of success in stopping them, but it did alert them to the value of bombing. They started to build aircraft like the Vickers Vimy, but they took a long time to appear. Goble next had the prize job of leading 5 Squadron, who had just been re-equipped completely with Airco TH4s, which are designed by Jeffrey G. Haviland. Immediately he took special measures to double the armament, the rear firing armament in the aircraft, and instituted formation flying for better defence against fighters, because the DH-4 was very fast, and the only way it could be attacked was from above and behind when they'd run into this wall of machine gun fire. And also they used the formation for bombing. The leader would drop the bombs, everyone else would follow suit, and all the bombs were clustered around the target very well. Another thing that he did was strengthen the ground protection against German night bombing and shelling. He really looked after the welfare of his soldiers. The squadron was first stationed near Dunkirk, and from there they had a range of about 100 kilometres, as you can see by the arrow. Most of the action was south, so they moved there on the 3rd of March. A typical action was an attack on a German airfield at Bersigny. A bombing raid occurred, and lurking high in the sky were supposed to be British fighters, but they didn't appear when the German fighters did, so the bombers had to fight their own way back. Goble, flying in the back seat of the aircraft, shot down 2 aircraft, which brought his total kills, in inverted commas, to 10. Germany had just defeated Russia. Russia was out of the war. They rushed all their resources to the East Front because the Americans had also declared war and they were on the way. So the only hope they had was to make a huge attack on the East Front. This was anticipated, and the diagram down to the left shows how Goble's and other squadrons handled it. First of all, the green line shows that half the ground crew were sent backwards to form a base several miles behind, while the bombers flew with the red arrows, attacking the ground forces as they came in, and getting closer and closer and closer to the airfield until they couldn't stay there anymore. So the bombers took off from the airfield, made a raid, came back to the prepared base, while the ground crew went behind to make another base. Goble's squadron took 4 bases, used 4 bases in the retreat to near Amiens. The pink cross on this picture up near Amiens is Villers-Bretonneux, which is the town saved, in inverted commas, by the Australian infantry. And it's interesting to note that they are probably aided in this by air cooperation from a squadron led by an Australian. This is the final pattern of how bombing occurred. The retreat was supposed to go like this for all the fighting groups, but Goble was particularly successful, and the heavies lined up to praise him, as you can see here. I'm not going to read it out. Look at it yourself later on if you wish. About this time, the Royal Air Force was formed and absorbing the Naval Air Service. And Goble espoused several theories. A lot of the squadron leaders were hairy-chested and didn't worry about casualties and things like that. Goble insisted that discipline in air fighting should occur and it reduced casualties, and that the main thing was not just to drop a bomb, but to drop it effectively. On the 18th of June 1918, Goble, flying in the back seat again, his aircraft was hit by anti-aircraft fire, and the pilot was unconscious. And Goble controlled the aircraft from the rear seat with rudimentary joystick and a throttle control only. Throughout this presentation, I've not enumerated all the narrow escapes that Goble had, otherwise we'd be here forever. but this was virtually the last time that he is involved in something really serious. There was an epidemic of enteric fever, bubonic plague, and he didn't take vaccination, but spent the end of the war in hospital in England recovering. He was appointed an acting Lieutenant Colonel and Air Advisor to the Australian Naval Board. The Royal Australian Air Force was equipped with the Imperial Gift and other aircraft, 1919 to 1922. Britain was given 100 aircraft. There's considerable debate about who should be the leader. Richard Williams on the left was like Goble, of middle class background, skilled, brave, lucky, and was the candidate from the Army. Goble was the candidate for the Navy. The logical thing was Williams Commander-in-Chief, Goble second in command. And the problem was the two of them hated each other. The normally circumspect Australian Dictionary of Biography says that the practice was to try and keep them apart, leave one in England while the other is in Australia. Meanwhile, William Morris Hughes had looked at the Air Force and decided it needs some seaplanes. So he made a captain's call and ordered 6 seaplanes, Fairey F-111s, large aircraft, about 2.5 times the size of a tiger moth, much the same speed as a tiger moth because of the problem with floats and things like that. Well, Williams was overseas, so Goble got approval to make a flight around Australia. And this was a huge operation. You had to have fuel dumps all around the country. An enormous feat of logistics. I'm not going to tell the whole story, just the one leg from Thursday Island, which was quite a town in 1924. Under Corporal Gurr, a large supply dump had been established, including an engine and some floats. Now the aircraft needed floats, and it had to be lifted. So Corporal Gurr is alleged to have created a shear leg, so like the document, like the picture on the top right, and it enabled a 3-ton weight just to be pulled up with pulleys. So they lifted up the aircraft and replaced the floats, which were a constant cause of trouble, and waited until the weather was right to make the next step. Now, up till this time, they'd simply followed the coast. So when an engine failure occurred, and they'd already had 2, they could simply land somewhere quite easily. But the only way to get from Thursday Island to Elcho Island was straight across the Gulf of Carpentaria. These settlements weren't there then. So they had to wait until at least the wind was not against them. Had to wait for that. They had to load the aircraft with as much fuel as they possibly could, to the extent that they didn't even take clothes. But at the time, the fear of the Aboriginal people was such that they carried a couple of 303 rifles and 500 rounds of ammunition. Anyway, the point about it was the engine is really terribly unreliable. There are no ships in the area, so any crash landing in the middle of the Gulf Interior was a death sentence. Still, they set off with amazing bravery and made the trip quite well. At the beginning of the trip, there's very little publicity, but once they passed Elcho Island and Darwin and came down into Western Australia, where there was a functioning airline already, Western Australian Airlines, the publicity grew until in Perth, this full page of pictures was printed, and that was very rare. A feature of the page was Mrs. Goble. When Goble was lost taking a few extra days across the northern part of Australia and out of touch, the paparazzi, or the equivalent that time, asked her if she was frightened, and she said, "No, he'll be all right. I've got every faith in him." And she got a lot of good press as a result. Well, the arrival in Melbourne was an absolute triumph. The Governor-General, the Governor, all the politicians met him and carried him like this to the local government people, and he had an enormous welcome before returning to Point Cook. They were awarded the Britannia Trophy for the most outstanding flight in the British Empire. McIntyre, the pilot, received the Oswald Watt Medal for the most outstanding feat as a pilot, and both were made CBEs. The Fairies began the aerial survey of Barrier Reef, and Goble took part in that. Just for a while he did. I love this picture of the ferry from HMS Geranium. The aviator's work was celebrated by the naming of Mustard Patches, Swinburne Patches, Goble Reef and RAAF Shoals. And you can still find these names today if you look for them. Well, that set the whole trip set a fashion for Round Australia trips. And H.C. Brinsmead, the recently appointed Director of Civil Aviation, made a land trip around Australia. When Williams returned from overseas, the cynics say that he was very jealous of Goble's feat and made an even better flight himself to New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. Interestingly, McIntyre was still the pilot. He was chosen again as the pilot. McIntyre, by the way, was a brilliant pilot, Scotsman, left the Air Force in 1928 and was killed while flying our South Australian Aero Club Cirrus Moth, I'll get it right in a moment, Cirrus Moth in 1929. A remarkable aviator, one of the few people to have the Oswald Watt Medal more than once. To finish off the story of Goble and Williams, as I said, they tended to keep them half a continent apart. Goble became Deputy Director of Air Operations for the RAAF, commanded a bombing base at Abington, came back to Australia, had another spell of being leader, but neither Goble nor Williams led the RAAF in World War II. Goble mainly was in Canada looking after the Empire Air Training Scheme. Both of them left the RAAF in 1946. They were pushed rather than jumped. Goble died in 1948 of hypertensive cerebrovascular disease, in other words, largely stress. But William lived on and had a distinguished career till age 90. That completes the story of James Goble in very brief form. A uniquely Australian story. A person of middle-class background, self-made due to courage, flying across the Gulf of Carpentaria, for heaven's sake. Self-made, lots of skill, lots of initiative, and possibly held back from promotion by anti-Australian prejudices both from the mother country and from Australia itself. Neither Curtin nor Menzies supported the idea of having an Australian head of the Royal Australian Air Force. But he deserves his place in history, and I'm glad that it has been recognised recently. So just going over what happened. 3 celebratory flights were made. Michael Smith traced the original Goble and McIntyre route in his modern seaplane, following the timetable that they set as closely as possible. And at the same time, another group of seaplanes read by David Gears in his Little Sea Ray flew around Australia, returning to Caboolture on the 26th of May. This is Dave's second trip around Australia in a Sea Ray at 500 feet, and it's a wonderful achievement. The RAAF, through a celebratory flight which wasn't very well publicised, a couple of growlers flew around Australia in 7 days, and it's a great pity that this whole exercise wasn't better publicised. David Cheers stops were far more frequent, etc. I'm now going to talk philately for the stamp collectors. There were no airmail flights on the... I'll do that again. There are no airmail commemorative issues for the first flight around Australia, but Pals magazine issued some Cinderella stamps of Goble in their children's magazine, and they are quite valuable. In 1974 there was a commemorative issue of stamps featuring Goble and McIntyre. Also in 1974 an F-111 flew around Australia to recognise the 50th anniversary, and it carried a huge number of covers. The pilot was RAAF Funnell, who later became Chief of the Air Force. Now, the ferry carried nearly 10,000 souvenir envelopes. It looked as though there was going to be no philatelic flight carried on the journey, so with some money given to me by the Aviation Historical Society of Australia, left over from the previous flight, I commissioned 3 50-copy issues of covers which were flown around the country, 50 celebrating Michael's flight, 50 celebrating David Cheers' flight, and 50 celebrating Kathy Babbis, who was David's co-pilot and was the first woman pilot to fly a seaplane around Australia. If you're a stamp collector and you'd like one of these, let me know. I can organise some for you. Some have been sold by the people, but they're only 150 in total. We didn't think that the Australia Post was going to release a stamp issue, but they did, and that came on the market just a few days ago, and there's some very interesting stuff there. So that brings to the end my formal presentation. I'm hoping now that we can organise a couple of film clips from the various social media and other sources, and have a talk about what we've done. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks, Peter.
Run this one here, the Today Show.
Okay, yep.
And I'll maximise it.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Look at these images. Just beautiful. Last month we wished aviator Michael Smith bon voyage on his mission to, I can't do French, you know that, to circumnavigate the Australian coastline in a seaplane.
44 days and 95 flying hours later, Michael joins us live now from Melbourne. Michael,
Bravo.
mission accomplished, my friend. How are you feeling?
Top of the morning. I'm feeling pretty elated, actually. That was a pretty epic journey, and it was, yeah, like an amazing thing. The way I flew along the beach and was so close to it all the way around.
Wow.
I just can't believe I've now seen literally every bit of beach of this country.
What a privilege to do that. It's the greatest country on earth, and you saw the best of it. What was the moment like when you touched down in St Kilda?
So St Kilda, look, you've always got to roll with the punches, and so I couldn't
Yes.
touch down at St Kilda because the waves were huge. I flew over the top, and then the plan was to do a splash at St Kilda and then go to Point Cook. So I flew low over St Kilda to wave to everyone, and then went back to Point Cook, where I was amazed to find the fire brigade waiting to welcome me home, which was very special.
What were the emotions like?
Look, it's always nice when you see your family standing there right in front of you and you haven't seen them for a while. There was a really nice crowd. There was actually a brass band playing, so that was another surprise. The RAAF really turned it on. So I felt, elated, and, you know, like, what could be better than a brass band?
A mariachi band?
To spice it up a bit. And I mean, I think it's hilarious. Look, as a Melburnian, Michael, you've seen all these amazing beaches across Australia along the coastline, and then you land in Point Cook. It's not quite the same, is it?
Well, I mean, Point Cook is the home of aviation for the Air Force in Australia, so I was really chuffed to be able to take off and return to there. But I'd tell you, the thing about coming back to Melbourne is, you know, you just look over my shoulder at those clouds. I didn't have rain from Cape York all of the way around the top of Australia through Darwin, the west coast, and I didn't get rain until I crossed the border into Victoria yesterday. So welcome home.
Oh.
Any funky experiences in the air?
Look, the biggest problem is always weather. So, you know, a bit of this weather, you get low cloud on going up the coast, you know, some short delays along the way, but nothing that really was a big problem. The plane behaved itself really well. Met a few interesting people along the way. So, you know, that's always curious.
Yeah, we're just looking at the vision of your bed as well, so you slept in the plane too.
When I needed to. So, for instance, I stopped at a place called Israelite Bay on the Western Australian coast that used to be a telegraph station. It's one of the spots they refueled 100 years ago when Goble and McIntyre did the original trip. Yeah. But today, that's an abandoned site. The roof's blown off the building. So I landed there, and there probably wasn't anyone for 100 Ks, and I have the bed in the plane, so when I get to those spots, I can just sleep the night and keep a bit of food.
Pretty
and
amazing.
It was magical.
All right, you are in a really good position to judge the best beach in Australia. So lay it on the line, brother.
Yeah.
Okay, so I must say, when I was leaving on this, I thought the best coastline was going to be the Kimberley region, and I was really looking forward to it, and it was stunning. But it turns out it was just a couple of days ago, flying from Ceduna to Port Lincoln along the Great Australian Bight. Literally, in those couple of hours of flying, I saw every bit of the Australian coast compacted into that one coastline, with the exception of mangroves. It was literally like a checklist. It was like sand dunes, yep, check. Red cliffs falling into the sea, yep, check. And it just kept turning it on. So that blew me away. And right at the end of it, I went over Coffin Bay, which is gorgeous. And so when I got to Port Lincoln, I had to have some oysters.
No.
Of course you did. What a reward.
I could taste them all the way there.
What's next?
Oh, look, honestly, I'll be back at work today. You know, I love these journeys, but, you know, I'm not a full-time adventurer. Every 4 or 5 years, I try to do a big trip like this. And, you know, but I also love what I do for work. Life's its own adventure, and I look forward to getting back to that. But there's always, I can't help but think about what the next trip might be, and I've got 2 ideas that I dreamed up while I was on this one.
Well, let us know what they turn out to be. We love following all of your adventures. Good on you, mate. Thank you so much.
It's great to be on. Thanks so much for following.
Thank you, Michael.
I'll go to this other page that you wanted me to show. Okay. And I'll just sort of...
Oh, this is just, you can follow the whole trips of all of the people. This is Michael Smith's pages, and he's got, lots of time, lots of film looking out the window and things like that, and you can see the starting and landing times and all that kind of thing. I'm hopeful that I can put together one of my little books on the 3 celebration flights, just as a matter of record. But it's well worthwhile persevering with this, just to get a picture of what is going on. So
Okay, so there's a whole
Yeah.
heap of places to have a look. Go to the next one.
yeah. Now we're on David Cheers's page, 100 Facebook of that has the movies on it.
There he is, upside down, trying to fix the taco.
A lady, Kathy Babis from Missouri, heard about the flight and came to Australia and was David Gear's co-pilot, and they went. She was interested in publicising women's flying and the study of STEM in schools, and she gave talks at various towns on that. But basically, the wonderful achievement is David himself. This is the second time he's flown around Australia, and this time he stuck to the coast 500 feet high all the way, which is absolutely beautiful stuff. Okay, try a movie, please. Yeah, please.
Touching down with a world record after weeks of flying over the Coral Sea.
The main thing was meeting all the people along the way.
Kathy Babis is in Australia for the first time after becoming the first woman to complete a lap around the country in an amphibious seaplane. She joined pilot David Gear on Easter Saturday, 58 days later, making it back to the Caboolture airfield in a plane that can land on tarmac and water.
I'm dying to do it again. I just want to jump into the plane now, turn around and go in the other direction.
From the sights of Pelican Banks off Gari to the tropics of North Queensland, in Airlie Beach, Kathy even opted to skydive.
My last skydive before that was 1974, and I broke both my feet.
There were no broken bones this time, but the journey didn't come without a few issues.
Problems with wheels, we had a flat tire.
It marks 100 years since the RAAF first flew a plane around Australia, and aviation was dominated by male pilots.
I want to encourage women, diverse people of all sorts, to consider a career in aviation.
Tom Duffy, 7 News.
Mm-hmm.
Righto.
Okay.
I'll just cursor down.
Yeah.
See what else is on here. Want to run that one at all?
All right. Well, try that one. See what this happens. It's well worth having a look. I spent an interesting afternoon, particularly on Michael's page. David's pages have some wonderful coastal scenery. It's the camera technology is amazing. Well, I think the next thing is the Pacific flight of Charles Kingsford Smith. In 1929, 2029. But I can't think of any other major anniversaries until then. Can anyone?
Nope.
No. So Michael will have to dream up something special. He's done all sorts of funny things, like during COVID, when people weren't allowed to leave Victoria, he flew around the border of Victoria at 500 feet. Just inside the border. Using his tracking device, he put the track of his Sun Theatre in Melbourne, the emblem of that, onto the map, like the Qantas flight did a while back. But anyway, that brings to an end what I wanted to show you. I hope you found it interesting. And I'd be interested to hear people's opinion on whether the commemoration flights are worthwhile. A few people have said to me, oh, you know, who gives a whatever. But I do think that just reminding ourselves of these times is important. Okay, so thanks for watching and listening, and I'll leave it open for comments and leave you at that. Thanks very much, people.
Tom, I might kick off. Australian Geographic.
Yeah.
When are they expected to produce an article on the flight?
Yeah. There's a story about okay, I'll start that again. I'm expressing it badly. A coffee table book is in prospect, and the actual story of the flight will be about 6 months. But yeah, that's all I know.
Okay.
As I said, with the philatelic stuff, there was none. So I've got the first of them here today. Michael Smith's journey around Australia, and he actually got the Australia Post to commission a limited run of a couple of hundred stamps for him. He had pay them extra, but they're not the same stamps as these official ones, which which featured the Brinsmead flight and the Goble flight, and they've been on the market for a few days.
Hello, it's Warwick Henry calling from Brisbane. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm just going to comment. We all know that Charles Kingston Smith was knighted, so it's Sir Charles Kingston Smith. It was interesting about an hour or so ago in your presentation, and as it showed what degree of knighthood he had. And because there was a picture there that had Charles Kingston Smith, KBE, so he was a Knight of the Order of the British Empire.
Yeah. In my original position to the World War I historians, I mentioned the remarkable West Australian Airlines, which started as one of the first scheduled airlines in the world in 1920 and covered a huge distance up the west coast of Australia. So that by 1924 you had an airline service going from Derby right down to Perth. And of course Norman Brearley was the founder of that, but Charles Kingsford Smith also flew for him for quite a while. And then at one stage, to make money quickly, he stopped being a pilot, and he and Anderson, I think, established a truck transport service at Carnarvon, and they made money which they put towards the Pacific flight. But really, we in the eastern states don't appreciate the great pioneering work in the West. When Goble flew around the country, I don't think there was an aircraft that had flown north of Rockhampton, anywhere between Rockhampton and Darwin. I'm certain that there wasn't one that flew anywhere